Father left inheritance, only to his new children, but his first daughter. What happened next? Hi everyone. Before we get into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel's reach has been dropping a bit, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you new and interesting stories. Your support means the world to us, and together we can grow this channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get to today's story. I'm writing from a temporary account for obvious reasons, and I've changed some details to protect my anonymity. You want to know what betrayal tastes like? It tastes like your father's favorite cherry pie cooling on the windowsill while he tells his new wife that you're just going through a phase when you cry about missing him. It smells like his cologne lingering in the hallway after he's already left for his new family's soccer game. It sounds like the click of the front door when he chooses them over you, again. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how I learned that blood isn't thicker than convenience, but revenge, well, revenge is thicker than both. I was 7 when my mother died. Cancer, quick and merciless, leaving behind only the faint scent of her lavender perfume in the closets, and a father who looked at me like I was a daily reminder of everything he'd lost. But for a while, God, for a beautiful, shining while, it was just us. Dad would make pancakes every Sunday morning, the kind that stuck to the pan because he never could get the temperature right. Sarah's special pancakes, he'd call them, as if the burnt edges were intentional. We'd eat them with too much syrup while watching cartoons, and he'd let me paint his nails with my little girl nail polish, pink with glitter. He wore it to work once and came home laughing about how his secretary thought he was getting in touch with his feminine side. Those were the good days. The days when I believed I was enough for him. He'd pick me up from school in his old Ford pickup, the one that smelled like sawdust and coffee, and we'd stop at Miller's Diner for chocolate milkshakes. I'd tell him about my day how Jessica Morrison pulled my hair during recess, how I got an A on my spelling test, how Mr. Peterson made us write about our heroes and I wrote about him. His face would light up when I said that, and he'd ruffle my hair and say, "You're my hero too, kiddo." We had our routines. Saturday mornings at the hardware store where he'd let me pick out screws and nails while he chatted with Bill Henderson about baseball. Sunday afternoons building birdhouses in the garage, my small hands trying to hold the wood steady while he showed me how to use the drill. "Patience, Sarah," he'd say when I got frustrated. "Good things take time." The house felt alive then. Dad would hum while he cooked dinner, usually spaghetti with that jarred sauce from the grocery store. But sometimes he'd attempt Mom's meatloaf recipe and we'd order pizza when it inevitably turned into a brick. We'd play Scrabble at the kitchen table and he'd let me use made-up words as long as I could define them. "Flibberty-gibbet," I'd say, placing my tiles with ceremonial importance. "It means someone who talks too much." "That's actually a real word," he'd laugh. "Where'd you learn that?" "Mom used to call you that." His smile would flicker then, just for a moment, before he'd clear his throat and count my points. For 3 years, it was perfect. Well, as perfect as grief allows. We were a team, him and me against the world, figuring out how to live without the woman who had been our anchor. I thought we were healing together. I thought we were enough. I was wrong. Linda Carmichael entered our lives like a slow poison, sweet at first, then gradually toxic. She was the substitute teacher who filled in for Mrs. Rodriguez when she had her baby. Blonde, perky, with a laugh that sounded like wind chimes and a way of tilting her head when she listened that made men feel like they were the most interesting person in the world. Dad met her at the parent-teacher conference in 5th grade. I remember sitting in the hallway afterward, swinging my legs from the plastic chair, when he emerged from the classroom with a different look on his face. Lighter somehow. Younger. "How'd it go?" I asked, bouncing up. "Good, kiddo. Real good. Miss Carmichael says you're one of her brightest students." But he wasn't looking at me when he said it. He was looking back toward the classroom door. The first date happened 2 weeks later. Dad told me it was just coffee. Just 2 adults talking about my education. He wore his good shirt, the blue one Mom had bought him for their anniversary, and he smelled like aftershave instead of sawdust. "Mrs. Patterson will stay with you." he said, kissing the top of my head. Just for a couple hours. Mrs. Patterson was our elderly neighbor who smelled like cats and Bengay. She made me grilled cheese with processed cheese that squeaked between my teeth and let me watch TV until 9 o'clock. When Dad came home, he was humming. The second date was dinner. The third was a movie. By the fourth, Linda started coming to the house. She was nice enough at first, I'll give her that. She brought cookies store-bought, not homemade like Mom's, but she arranged them on a pretty plate and talked to me like I mattered. She asked about school, about my friends, about whether I liked to read. When I showed her my rock collection, she didn't laugh or call it childish. She picked up each stone and asked where I'd found it, nodding seriously as I explained the difference between quartz and granite. "You're so smart," she'd say, and I believed she meant it. But there were signs even then, little things that made my stomach twist. The way she rearranged Mom's figurines on the mantel, claiming she was just dusting. How she'd suggest Dad change the channel when I was watching my shows. The gentle way she'd redirect his attention when I was telling a story. "That's fascinating, sweetie," she'd interrupt. "But your dad looks tired. Maybe save the rest for tomorrow?" Dad would nod gratefully, like she'd rescued him from some tedious obligation, like spending time with his daughter was work. The real change started when they got engaged. I was 12, old enough to understand what was happening, but too young to articulate why it felt like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. Dad sat me down at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd played Scrabble and eaten burnt pancakes, and told me Linda was going to be part of our family now. "You'll have a mother again," he said, like that was something I'd asked for. "I already had a mother," I replied. His face went tight. "Sarah, your mother is gone. Linda wants to take care of you. Take care of us. She loves you." But I could see the lie in his eyes. Linda loved the idea of me, the concept of being a stepmother, the way it completed her picture of domestic bliss. She didn't love me, the real me, with my dirt-stained knees and my stubborn streak and my tendency to ask too many questions. The wedding was small, held in Linda's church with her family and a few of Dad's work friends. I wore a pink dress that Linda picked out, too frilly and too tight. And I stood beside her as she promised to love and honor my father. When the preacher asked if anyone objected, I wanted to stand up and scream. Instead, I smiled and threw rose petals and pretended everything was fine. The honeymoon was a weekend in the mountains. They left me with Mrs. Patterson again, and when they came back, Linda moved in completely. Her clothes in Mom's closet, her shampoo in the bathroom, her coffee mugs in the kitchen cabinet. She painted over the growth chart on the doorframe where Mom had marked my height every birthday. "We need to make this house ours," she explained when I protested. "Fresh start for everyone." She was pregnant 3 months later. I found out by accident, walking into the kitchen for a glass of water and hearing her on the phone with someone. 6 weeks, she was saying. "We haven't told Sarah yet. Richard thinks we should wait until the first trimester is over." Richard. She called him Richard now, not Dad. It made him sound like a stranger. They told me over dinner that night. Spaghetti and meatballs Linda's recipe, which actually worked, and garlic bread from a tube. Dad cleared his throat and looked nervous, like he was about to give a presentation at work. "Sarah, honey, we have some news." I looked up from my plate, where I'd been pushing noodles around in patterns. "You're going to be a big sister," Linda said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. Her engagement ring, a diamond solitaire, bigger and shinier than the simple gold band Mom had worn, caught the light. "Isn't that exciting?" I stared at them both, processing. A baby. A new baby who would be theirs. Completely theirs, with no memories of another mother to complicate things. A baby who would fit perfectly into Linda's vision of family, who wouldn't carry the ghost of my mother in their eyes. "When?" I asked. "February," Dad said, "right around Valentine's Day." "How romantic," I muttered. Linda's smile faltered. "Sarah, this is a good thing. You've always wanted a sibling." Had I? I couldn't remember ever saying that. Maybe when I was little and felt lonely. But that was before I understood that sometimes having Dad to myself was better than sharing him. The pregnancy transformed Linda into someone else entirely. She glowed, everyone said so. The mailman, the grocery store clerk, the women at church. She became the center of Dad's universe in a way that made me feel invisible. He catered to her every whim, rushing home from work to make sure she wasn't overdoing it, cooking dinner when she felt too tired, rubbing her feet while she complained about swelling. "Sarah, help your stepmother with the groceries," became his constant refrain. "Sarah, keep it down. Linda's resting." "Sarah, not tonight. Linda needs her sleep." I learned to tiptoe around the house, to speak in whispers, to become as small and unobtrusive as possible. The baby wasn't even born yet, and already it was more important than I was. Michael Richard Carmichael Thompson arrived on February 12, 2003, weighing 7 pounds and 4 ounces of pure favoritism. I wasn't allowed in the delivery room. Too young, Linda decided. So I sat in the waiting room with Mrs. Patterson, eating stale vending machine cookies and pretending I wasn't jealous of an infant. When Dad finally came out, his face was radiant in a way I hadn't seen since Mom was alive. He scooped me up and spun me around, laughing. "You have a baby brother, kiddo. He's perfect. Just perfect." And he was perfect, I suppose. Tiny and pink and helpless, with Dad's nose and Linda's chin and lungs that could wake the dead. When I first held him, something inside me softened despite myself. He was so small, so completely dependent, and when he wrapped his miniature fingers around mine, I felt a rush of protectiveness that surprised me. "He likes you," Dad said, watching us. "Look at that grip. He's going to be strong." For a moment, I let myself hope that maybe this could work. Maybe we could be a real family. Maybe the baby would bring us together instead of driving us apart. I was such a naive little idiot. The first few months weren't terrible. Linda was exhausted from night feedings and needed help, so I actually felt useful. I'd hold Michael while she showered, or fetched diapers, or warm bottles. Dad was proud of how good I was with the baby, bragging to anyone who'd listen about his little helper. But as Michael got older and more interactive, the dynamic shifted. Every milestone, his first smile, his first word, his first step was a celebration that revolved entirely around him and his parents. I became the audience, not the family. Dad started missing my school events. Michael's teething, or Linda needs me to pick up formula. The pancake sundaes stopped because the baby needed to nap. The hardware store trips ended because Michael was too fussy in the car. One by one, all our traditions disappeared, replaced by the all-consuming needs of the new baby. When Michael was 2, Linda got pregnant again. Emma Grace arrived the following spring, another perfect blonde cherub who sealed my fate as the outsider. Now there were 2 babies to revolve around, 2 sets of needs that came before mine, 2 reasons for Dad to be too busy, too tired, too distracted. The house filled with baby gear-high chairs and playpens and colorful plastic toys that hurt when you stepped on them barefoot. My rock collection got moved to make room for a changing table. The family photos on the mantle were replaced with professional portraits of Dad, Linda, and the babies. I was in exactly one of those photos, standing stiffly behind Linda's chair like a reluctant afterthought. "Sarah, watch your brother and sister for a minute," became Linda's favorite phrase. Not "will you help me?" or "could you please?" Just the expectation that I would drop whatever I was doing to babysit. When I complained, she'd get that wounded look and say, "I thought you loved them." I did love them. That was the problem. Despite everything, I loved Michael's gap-toothed grin and the way Emma would clap her hands when I made funny faces. They were innocent in all this, victims of the same shifting dynamics that had displaced me. But loving them didn't make it hurt less when Dad referred to them as my kids, while I was standing right there. The breaking point came when I was 16. I'd been saving money from my part-time job at the bookstore, planning to buy a car so I wouldn't have to rely on Dad for rides. I had almost enough, just needed another couple $100s. I asked Dad if I could borrow against my future allowances, promising to pay him back. "Money's tight right now, kiddo," he said without looking up from his newspaper. Michael needs new shoes and Emma's starting preschool. Maybe next month. That same week, he bought Linda a new SUV because her old car wasn't family-friendly enough for 2 car seats. That's when I started to understand. I wasn't part of the family anymore. I was a remnant, a leftover from his previous life that he was too polite to discard but too indifferent to prioritize. The realization was like swallowing glass sharp and painful and impossible to ignore. High school became my refuge. I threw myself into academics, spending long hours at the library and joining every club that would keep me out of the house. I made friends whose families actually seemed to like each other, and I'd linger at their dinner tables, fascinated by parents who asked questions and listened to the answers. At home, I became a ghost. I'd slip in through the back door, grab leftovers from the fridge, and disappear to my room. Sometimes I'd hear them laughing downstairs. Dad doing his silly voices for story time. Linda singing lullabies, the kids giggling, and it was like listening to a life I wasn't invited to join. The worst part was how natural it all seemed to everyone else. Friends would ask about my little siblings with that automatic assumption that of course I adored them. Of course we were all one big happy family. I learned to smile and nod and say the right things, but inside I was screaming. When I graduated valedictorian, Dad came to the ceremony but left immediately afterward because Emma had a fever. When I got accepted to Columbia with a partial scholarship, he said, "That's great, honey," and went back to helping Michael with his Lego castle. When I left for college, he hugged me goodbye and told me to call, but his phone was already buzzing with a text from Linda about grocery shopping. College was freedom. For 4 years, I could pretend I came from a normal family, that I wasn't the unwanted reminder of my father's first life. I studied hard, made friends, dated a few guys who didn't understand why I never talked about home. I called every few weeks, dutifully updating Dad on my classes and listening to him tell me about Michael's Little League games and Emma's dance recitals. The conversations got shorter each year. I graduated summa cum laude and got accepted to law school. Dad said he was proud but couldn't make it to graduation because it was Michael's birthday weekend. Linda sent a card with a generic congratulations message and a $20 gift certificate to Target. Law school was harder, but more rewarding. I specialized in family law, partly out of professional interest and partly because I understood broken families from the inside out. I graduated 3rd in my class and got hired by a prestigious firm in Manhattan. I was 25 years old, successful, independent, and utterly alone. Dad called to congratulate me when I passed the bar exam. In the background, I could hear Emma practicing piano and Linda calling everyone to dinner. "We're so proud of you, kiddo," he said, but his voice was distracted. "Hey, I have to go." Linda made pot roast. Pot roast had been my favorite meal when I was little. Mom used to make it every Sunday, and after she died, Dad had tried to recreate it for months before giving up. Now Linda made it, and it was their tradition, their family dinner. I wasn't even a memory anymore. The years blurred together. I visited for Christmas and occasional birthdays, playing the role of the successful big sister who lived in the big city. Michael and Emma were polite but distant. I was more like their dad's friend than their sibling. Linda was cordial in that surface-level way that never acknowledged our complicated history. And Dad treated me like a guest in his own home. I'd sleep in what used to be my bedroom but was now Linda's craft room, on an air mattress surrounded by sewing machines and boxes of seasonal decorations. The growth chart was long gone, painted over and forgotten. My rock collection had disappeared during one of Linda's spring cleanings. There was no trace that I'd ever lived there, ever been part of that family. But I kept showing up, keep making the effort. Keep hoping that somehow, someday, Dad would remember that I was his daughter too. The last time I saw him alive, he was 62 and looked older. The construction business was doing well. Linda had convinced him to expand, to hire more crews, to bid on bigger projects. They'd moved to a larger house in a better neighborhood, complete with a pool and a 3-car garage. Michael was starting high school, tall and athletic like Dad had been. Emma was in middle school, already beautiful like her mother, with Dad's sense of humor and Linda's social confidence. I sat at their dinner table, eating Linda's excellent lasagna, and listening to them plan a family vacation to Europe. A family vacation that didn't include me, though they were too polite to say so directly. "It's going to be amazing," Linda gushed. "2 weeks, London and Paris and Rome. The kids are so excited." "What about you, Sarah?" Dad asked, remembering his manners. "Any travel plans?" I told him about a work conference in Seattle, and he nodded politely before turning back to Michael's story about football practice. I might as well have been talking about my grocery list for all the interest he showed. After dinner, I helped clean up while Linda supervised the kids' homework. Dad retreated to his home office, a luxury he'd never had in our old house to work on project estimates. When I knocked on the door to say goodbye, he looked up from his computer with mild surprise, like he'd forgotten I was there. "Leaving already?" he asked. "Early flight tomorrow." He hugged me briefly, absently, already turning back to his spreadsheets. "Drive safe, kiddo. Let us know when you get home." I wanted to say something then. Wanted to ask him if he remembered the pancakes and the nail polish and the way he used to call me his hero. Wanted to demand to know when I'd stopped being his daughter and started being an obligation. Wanted to scream and cry and make him see what he'd done to us. Instead, I said, "I love you, Dad," and waited for him to say it back. He did, distractedly, without looking up. "Love you too, honey." I drove to the airport with tears streaming down my face, knowing somehow that I'd never see him again. The call came 6 months later. Heart attack, sudden and massive. Dad had been at the job site, checking on the foundation for a new office building, when he collapsed. By the time the paramedics arrived, it was too late. Linda called me herself, sobbing into the phone. "Sarah, he's gone. Your father's gone." I took the first flight out, numb with shock and grief and 1,000 things I'd never gotten to say. The funeral was packed. Dad had been well-liked in the community, successful in business, generous with his time and money. Person after person told me what a good man he'd been, what a devoted father, what a tragic loss for Linda and the kids. I sat in the front pew between Linda and Michael, wearing a black dress I'd bought at the airport, listening to the pastor talk about a man who sounded like a stranger. This Richard Thompson, who coached Little League and volunteered at the church and never missed his children's school events, where had he been when I needed him? The graveside service was small, just family and close friends. I threw dirt on the coffin and whispered goodbye to the father I'd lost years before he died. Back at the house, their house, not mine, people brought casseroles and shared memories. I stood in the kitchen, accepting condolences and helping Linda organize food donations, feeling like an actress playing a role. Everyone assumed I was devastated, that I'd lost the most important person in my world. They weren't wrong, exactly. I had lost him. I'd just lost him gradually, imperceptibly, over the course of 20 years. The will reading was scheduled for the following week. I almost didn't go. What was the point? But some masochistic part of me needed closure, needed to see exactly how little I'd mattered in Dad's final accounting of his life. Robert Hendricks had been Dad's lawyer for 15 years, a soft-spoken man with kind eyes and an unfortunate comb-over. His office smelled like leather and old books, and the chairs were the kind that squeaked when you moved. Linda sat to my left, dabbing at her eyes with tissues. Michael and Emma flanked her, looking uncomfortable in their dress clothes. Mr. Hendricks cleared his throat and began reading. The language was formal, full of whereases and heretofores that made my head spin. But the meaning was crystal clear. The house went to Linda, as expected. The business went to Linda, with provisions for the kids when they came of age. The savings accounts, the investment portfolio, the life insurance. All of it went to Linda, with trust funds established for Michael and Emma's college educations and futures. I listened to the recitation of assets with growing numbness. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in real estate, a business worth over $1 million. Retirement accounts that would ensure Linda never had to work again. A college fund for each child that would cover not just tuition, but graduate school if they wanted it. And then Mr. Hendricks reached the end. To my daughter Sarah Thompson, I leave my watch and my tools, with the hope that she'll remember our time working together in the garage. That was it. A watch his everyday Timex, not even the good one Mom had bought him, and a set of tools I'd probably never use. 29 years of being his daughter, and I was worth less than the riding lawnmower he'd left to his neighbor. The silence in the room was deafening. Linda looked stricken, like she hadn't known how thoroughly I'd been erased. Michael stared at his hands. Emma, bless her teenage heart, looked angry on my behalf. I'm sure he meant to. Linda started. No, I said quietly. He meant exactly what he wrote. I stood up, shook Mr. Hendrick's hand, and walked out of that office with whatever dignity I had left. In the parking lot, Linda caught up to me. Sarah, wait. This isn't right. He loved you, you know he did. I turned to face her. This woman who'd gotten everything I'd wanted, my father's love, his attention, his legacy. She looked genuinely distressed, and I realized she probably was. Linda wasn't evil, just selfish. She'd taken everything because it had been offered, never thinking about the cost to anyone else. Did he? I asked. Because I'm not sure he did. Not for a very long time. He talked about you all the time when you were kids. He was so proud. When I was kids, Linda. When I was little and he didn't have a choice. But when you came along, when he got his do-over family, I became optional. And optional daughters don't get inheritances. She started to cry then, and part of me felt bad for her. She'd loved Dad, genuinely loved him, and now she was a widow with 2 teenagers and more money than she knew what to do with. But I couldn't comfort her. I was all out of comfort. I'll contest it, I said. What? The will. I'll contest it. 29 years as his daughter has to count for something legally. Linda's face went pale. Sarah, please, don't tear the family apart over this. Family? I laughed, and it sounded bitter even to me. Linda, I stopped being family years ago. This just makes it official. I drove back to the hotel and spent the night researching inheritance law, making phone calls to colleagues who specialized in estate litigation. The case wasn't hopeless. Dad's complete exclusion of his biological child while providing generously for his stepchildren could be challenged, especially if I could prove undue influence or lack of testamentary capacity. But as I read through case law and precedents, I realized something that made my stomach drop. I didn't want to spend the next several years fighting Linda and traumatizing Michael and Emma in court. I didn't want to become the bitter older sister who sued the family for money. And most of all, I didn't want Dad's final legacy to be a legal battle that would destroy what was left of our relationships. I wanted something else entirely. I wanted the truth. I spent the next 3 days going through Dad's papers, which Linda gave me access to without question. She was eager to cooperate, probably hoping I'd find evidence of his love that would change my mind about contesting the will. What I found was more revealing than either of us expected. Dad kept meticulous records, both personal and professional. Bank statements, tax returns, business receipts. Everything organized and filed with the precision of a man who'd built his success through attention to detail. But buried in his home office files, in a folder labeled personal, I found something that explained everything. Letters, dozens of them, written but never sent. They were addressed to me, dated over the course of 15 years. Some were typed, some handwritten, all of them full of the words he'd never been able to say out loud. Sarah, I know I haven't been the father you deserved since Linda and the kids came along. I see how you look at me sometimes, like you're trying to figure out where you fit. And it breaks my heart because the truth is, I don't know either. You remind me so much of your mother, not just how you look, but your stubbornness, your intelligence, the way you tilt your head when you're thinking. Sometimes I catch myself staring at you and suddenly I'm 35 again, and Julia is laughing at one of my terrible jokes, and the grief hits me all over again like a freight train. I know that's not fair to you. You're not your mother, you're your own person, brilliant and strong and so much better than I deserve. But I never learned how to separate my love for you from my grief for her and Linda. Linda doesn't carry that weight. With her, with our kids, I get to be the man I am now instead of the man I used to be. Does that make sense? Probably not. I'm not good with words like you are. I'm proud of you, kiddo. Prouder than I've ever told you. When you graduated valedictorian, when you got into Columbia, when you passed the bar, I wanted to shout it from the rooftops. My daughter, the lawyer. My daughter, who's going to change the world. But I didn't know how to say it without it sounding like consolation prize, like I was trying to make up for all the ways I'd failed you. I love you, Sarah. I loved you when you were 7 and painting my nails. I love you now, even though I haven't been able to show it the way I should. I hope someday you'll forgive me for being too much of a coward to send these letters, for choosing the easy love over the complicated one. Your proud but cowardly father, Dad. There were dozens more like it, spanning years. Explanations for missed birthdays, apologies for forgotten phone calls, expressions of pride and love that he'd apparently been unable to voice in person. In one letter, dated just 2 months before his death, he'd written about changing his will. I keep meaning to update the will to include you properly, but every time I sit down with Robert, I can't figure out how to divide things fairly. Linda and the kids need security. They've never known anything else. Never had to be as strong and independent as you've become. But you don't need my money, Sarah. You've built an incredible life for yourself without any help from me. You're successful and self-sufficient and amazing. And I'm terrified that leaving you money would feel like payment for a relationship I destroyed through my own weakness. I know that's not how it works. I know that inheritance isn't about need. It's about love and family and belonging. But I also know that nothing I leave you in a will can fix what I broke when you were 12 years old. Maybe it's better if I leave you something more meaningful. The tools we used to build things together. The watch I wore when I was trying to be the father you needed. Maybe those things will remind you of who we were before everything got complicated. I'm a fool, aren't I? You're going to read this someday and think I'm making excuses, and you'll be right. I am making excuses. Because the truth is, I was scared. Scared that reaching out would make things worse. Scared that you'd reject me the way I rejected you. Scared that it was too late to fix what I'd broken. Maybe it is too late. Maybe I waited too long, and now we're just strangers who share a name and some old memories. But I want you to know that loving you was never the problem, Sarah. I never stopped loving you. I just stopped knowing how to show it. I sat in his office chair, surrounded by 15 years of unspoken love, and cried until I couldn't breathe. All those years of feeling forgotten, of believing I didn't matter, and he'd been writing to me the whole time. He'd been proud of me, missed me, loved me, but somehow couldn't bridge the gap his own choices had created. It wasn't enough, of course. Love letters written in private don't make up for public indifference. Good intentions don't erase years of feeling like an afterthought. But they explained things, and understanding felt like a kind of closure I hadn't expected to find. I called Linda that night. I'm not going to contest the will, I told her. Oh, Sarah, thank you. I know this has been... I want something else instead. Silence on the other end of the line. I want to buy the construction business from you. What? Dad built that company from nothing. It's worth over $1 million now, and it's going to be worth more as the area develops. You don't know anything about running a construction business, and frankly, neither do Michael or Emma. But I know contracts, I know business law, and I know what Dad would have wanted. But the will says, the will leaves everything to you, which means you can sell it to whoever you want. I'm offering to buy it for fair market value. You'll get the money, I'll get the business, and Dad's legacy won't die with him. It took 3 months to negotiate the terms. Linda drove a hard bargain. She wasn't the naive substitute teacher anymore, but a widow with 2 kids to protect. I respected that, even appreciated it. We agreed on one. $2 million, financed partly through my savings, partly through a business loan that would take me 15 years to pay off. I quit my job at the law firm and moved back home. Not to Dad's old house, that would have been too strange, but to a small apartment across town. I kept half of Dad's crew, the ones who wanted to stay and work for his daughter, and hired new people to replace the ones who didn't trust a lawyer to run a construction company. It was hard work, harder than anything I'd done in corporate law. I had to learn about permits and building codes, about managing crews and bidding projects. I made mistakes that cost money, decisions that Dad would have laughed at. But slowly, gradually, I figured it out. The company grew. We got a reputation for quality work and fair dealing, the same reputation Dad had built over 30 years. I specialized in restoration projects, old buildings that needed careful attention and legal expertise to navigate historic preservation requirements. It wasn't just construction. It was resurrection, bringing forgotten places back to life. Michael and Emma visited sometimes, curious about what their dad's oldest daughter was doing with his legacy. They were good kids, despite everything. Polite and interested and surprisingly eager to learn about the grandfather they'd never known, the man who'd built the business with his own hands. He used to take me to job sites when I was little. I told Emma one day as we watched my crew frame a Victorian house restoration. He'd let me carry his level and pretend I was helping. I remember that, she said. He did the same thing with Michael and me, made us feel important. We stood in comfortable silence, watching the work progress. Maybe we'd never be close the way siblings should be, but we were learning to be something family adjacent, if not family proper. Linda sold the house and moved to a smaller place better suited for a woman with teenage children. We were civil to each other, even friendly in a careful way. She'd gotten what she needed, financial security for her and her children, and I'd gotten what I wanted, a way to honor Dad's memory while building something of my own. The business thrived. 5 years after Dad's death, Thompson Construction was one of the most respected renovation firms in the state. I'd paid off the loan early and hired 30 full-time employees. We'd restored dozens of historic buildings, turning them into offices and restaurants and apartments that would serve the community for generations. I kept Dad's tools in my office, displayed in a shadow box along with his old hard hat and the blueprints from his first solo project. The watch stayed in my pocket, a tangible reminder of the man who taught me that good things take time. But the real victory wasn't financial or professional. It was personal. Last month, I got a call from Michael. He was graduating from high school and had been accepted to the State University's engineering program. But that wasn't why he was calling. "Sarah," he said, and his voice cracked the way teenage boys' voices do when they're trying to sound grown up. "I was wondering, could I work for you this summer? At the company?" I almost dropped the phone. "You want to work construction?" "I want to learn what Dad did, what you do. Mom says you've made it into something amazing, and I want to be part of it, if you'll have me." I hired him the next day. He showed up on his first morning wearing new work boots and a hard hat that was too big for his head, looking nervous and eager and so much like Dad at 18 that it took my breath away. I put him on the crew restoring the old Carnegie Library downtown, doing grunt work and learning the basics. He was good at it. Patient and careful, with an eye for detail that reminded me of Dad, and a willingness to ask questions that reminded me of myself. By the end of the summer, he was talking about changing his major to architecture, about learning to design the buildings he was helping to restore. "I never knew this about him," he said one evening as we cleaned up the job site. "Dad, I mean, I knew he built things, but I didn't know he was an artist." I looked at the library facade we'd been carefully cleaning, revealing intricate stonework that had been hidden under decades of grime and neglect. He was. He just never called it that. "Will you teach me? I mean, really teach me? Not just the labor stuff, but the business side, the legal stuff, all of it?" I studied my half-brother's earnest face, seeing Dad's determination and something else, something that looked like hope. "Why?" "Because somebody should carry it on. The real way. The way he would have wanted. Mom's great, but she doesn't understand what he built here. Emma's going to be a doctor or a teacher or something that helps people in a different way. But me, I want to build things that last. I want to fix things that are broken. Like us, I thought, but didn't say. Like what Dad broke when he couldn't figure out how to love two families at once." "Okay," I said, "but it won't be easy. You'll start at the bottom, work your way up. No special treatment because you're the boss's brother." His face lit up like Christmas morning. Thank you so much." That was 6 months ago. Now Michael works for me part-time while attending college, learning the business from the ground up. Emma comes by sometimes too, bringing lunch and asking smart questions about project management and building codes. She's still planning on pre-med, but she says understanding construction will make her a better doctor, better at seeing how things fit together, how to fix what's broken. We're not the family Dad tried to create, splitting his love and attention between his old life and his new one. We're something different, something built on choice instead of obligation, on shared purpose instead of shared blood. Linda remarried last year, a nice man who treats her well and doesn't try too hard to be a father to her children. She invited me to the wedding, and I went, wearing a blue dress that brought out my eyes and sitting in the third row with colleagues from work. When she threw the bouquet, I didn't try to catch it, but Emma did, laughing as she snagged it out of the air. "Your turn next," she teased me afterward. "Maybe. I've been seeing someone. A preservation architect who works on projects similar to mine. He understands why I spend my weekends in dusty buildings, why I get excited about original millwork and proper restoration techniques. He knows about Dad and the letters and the long journey from rejection to acceptance. He's patient with my trust issues and my workaholic tendencies, and he makes me laugh in a way I'd forgotten was possible. More importantly, he sees me. Not as Richard Thompson's daughter or Linda's stepdaughter or Michael and Emma's half-sister, but as Sarah, the woman who took her father's tools and built something beautiful from the ruins of a relationship that never quite worked. 3 weeks ago, I was going through Dad's desk, looking for the original blueprints for a building we're restoring, when I found one more letter. This one was different, newer paper, recent date, sealed in an envelope with my name written in Dad's careful handwriting. Inside was a single sheet and a key. Sarah. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've probably discovered all the letters I never sent. I hope they explain some things, even if they don't excuse them. I hope you can forgive an old man who loved you more than he knew how to show. The key is to a safety deposit box at First National, box 247. I opened it when you graduated law school and added to it every year since. It's not much compared to what I should have given you, but it's something. I know you don't need my money. You never needed anything from me. You were always strong enough to build your own life. But maybe this will help you build something even bigger, something that honors your mother's memory and makes me proud to have been your father. I love you, kiddo. I always have. Dad, P.S. If you're reading this, you probably found a way to get the business back, didn't you? You always were too smart for your own good. I hope you're taking better care of it than I did. The safety deposit box contained $300,000 in bonds and certificates, accumulated over 8 years of deposits, a fortune hidden away, meant for me all along. There was also a copy of a newer Will 1 that would have left me an equal share of everything unsigned and dated the day before his heart attack. He'd been planning to change things. He'd been trying to find the courage to reach out, to make things right. He just ran out of time. I used the money to buy the building where Thompson Construction is headquartered, a beautiful 1920s warehouse that we restored and converted into offices and workshop space. There's a plaque by the front door. Thompson Construction, founded 1985, restored 2023, building things that last. In smaller letters underneath, in memory of Richard Thompson, who taught us that good things take time. Sometimes I stand in my office, the one with the view of the job sites and the framed photos of completed projects, and I think about forgiveness. Not the kind you grant because someone asks for it, but the kind you give because carrying anger is heavier than the hurt that caused it. Dad never got the chance to apologize in person. He never got to see what I built from the pieces of what he left behind. But I think he'd be proud of the woman I became and the family we created. Not through blood or marriage or legal documents, but through the harder work of choosing each other every day. Michael starts full-time after graduation, and we're already planning the expansion that will turn Thompson Construction into Thompson Associates. Emma's been accepted to medical school, but she's promised to handle our employee health programs when she's done with her residency. We're building something that will last, something bigger and better than what Dad imagined. Something that honors both the family he chose and the daughter he never stopped loving, even when he didn't know how to show it. The irony isn't lost on me. Dad left me nothing in his will because he thought I didn't need his money, didn't need his legacy, didn't need anything from him. He was wrong about the needing part. I needed his love, his attention, his acknowledgement that I mattered. But he was right about one thing. I didn't need his money to build a life worth living. I built it anyway, from the ground up, with my own hands and his tools and the stubborn determination I inherited from both my parents. And in the end, I got something better than an inheritance. I got the last laugh. The business Dad thought would go to Linda and eventually to Michael is mine now, bought and paid for, grown into something he never could have imagined. The family he tried to split in half has come together in ways he never expected, choosing love over convenience, understanding over resentment. And the daughter he left out of his will? She's the one carrying his name forward, the one teaching his values to the next generation, the one making sure his legacy is about more than money in a bank account. Some inheritances are written in wills. Others are built with hammers and hope, and the radical act of refusing to let other people's failures define your worth. Dad taught me that good things take time. He was right about that too. It just took longer than either of us expected.